Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, what is the best learning environment for a special needs child? Should they be in separate classes or with their peers? Our digital producer, Malika Valal, well, we discovered something for this conversation. We rooted it in the United States, and then our online community did what?
Right, well, they showed us just how universal this conversation is, and so people all over the world can relate, and so they're sharing their experiences with us. We're hearing from people in Ireland, that's where this person tweeted us. We're also hearing from Nigeria and even Zimbabwe. They're sharing their stories. So for those of you at home who are watching, we want you to share your thoughts. Use hashtag AJStream.
And joining us here in the studio, we have Maureen Loftus, and Maureen is a mother of a child with special needs. She's also the executive director at Learning RX. That's a US network of brain training centers. Maureen, it's great to have you here in the stream.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to hearing more from you in just a moment. But before we do that, this show, do I need to tell you, it is driven by you. So tell us what's going on in your part of the world. You can do that really easily. Go to facebook.com/AJStream and your story could wind up right here in the stream.
I'm Peter Pitts. I'm president of the Center for Medicine and the Public Interest, and I'm in the stream.
Now, ensuring your child receives the best possible education is a struggle for many, but even more so for parents of special needs children. With the passing of a 1975 federal law, all children with disabilities in the US were guaranteed the right to a public school education in the least restrictive environment. Now, this paved the way for special needs students to become integrated into mainstream classrooms in what is considered an inclusive approach to learning. Now, supporters point to the academic and social benefits for all the children, but critics say many schools don't have the resources and the teacher skills needed. So, what is the best classroom environment for special needs children? Joining us to talk about this, we have Mary Lawfer. She's a teacher who's taught special needs children in her classrooms. And also with us via Skype, Dan Habib is a filmmaker and project director at the University of New Hampshire Institute on Disability. He's also the dad of a child with special needs. So it's great to have you all here in the stream, everybody. You're very welcome. I want to start with Maureen, and when McKenna went to kindergarten, okay, it's always quite traumatic sending your toddler off to kindergarten. So how long did she last?
Well, actually it was in preschool. We sent her off to preschool because we felt like we weren't doing the right thing for her at home, and she wasn't developing and acting the same way, the right way. So we sent her to preschool at 2 and a half, and 6 weeks later we got a call from the school saying that we had to pick her up immediately.
Okay.
I was devastated.
What's she done? She's only 2.
She was a danger to herself in the classroom.
Wow.
I said I would sign a waiver. I would just keep trying something, but I said, I remember this day so vividly because I was on my way home with my 2-week-old infant, newborn, who I just had the well checkup, and I have this 2-week-old baby, and I'm told that my child cannot function in a classroom. And you're devastated as a parent. You're saying, but at the same time, I said to my husband, I guess we know something is wrong with her. It's not just us.
If you had to describe McKenna at 2, how would you describe it? So the rest of us can understand maybe what might have driven her teacher to say, okay, here you go, Maureen, you can have her back.
I tell people that she looked like she was on cocaine.
Wow.
She had the attention span of about 2 seconds. 30 seconds would be a long attention span for her. And so she was buzzing, constantly buzzing around the classroom. And it was just, it's a frenzy. And so with that kind of frenetic pace that she keeps, or as I had many mothers say to me, wow, she has a lot of energy. I said, she's completely out of control and I have no idea what to do with her. But with that kind of frenetic energy, you can't teach. You can't, it's disturbing every child in the classroom. So I can understand why it would be very difficult for her to be in the classroom.
Sure. See, Mary, you're a teacher. What would you have done with a little one like that was running around and up and down the walls?
Well, the first thing I would do is talk to the parents what works for you at home, and talk to the special ed teacher who has the background and the knowledge, the modes, strategies that I could use to help her. Instinctively, I would want to help her so that the class could go on and not be distracted.
Sure.
But I am responsible for all the students, so that would be a challenge.
Wow. Okay, so Dan, your son Samuel is now 14 years old. So when he was a little one, at what point did you have an experience like Maureen had, or was your experience slightly different?
Well, it was different, and I certainly can empathize with Maureen, because the moment you have that realization that your child is different or has a disability, it's devastating and it's very scary, and you are totally confused. So with Samuel, he wasn't developing typically as he was 4 months old, 5 months old. He wasn't rolling over, he wasn't sitting up, he wasn't doing some of the things our older son Isaiah had done. So we had an evaluation done, and I remember a doctor doing some tests and one day calling me and saying, we think your son has a mitochondrial disorder. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't really
I was just about to ask you, what does that mean?
Right. So I went on to what most parents would do, went on to Google and checked it out. And the first thing that came up was usually fatal. And I remember feeling like I'd been kicked in the stomach by a horse. And thankfully now we know there are thousands of kinds of mitochondrial disorders. They have many different results. In Samuel's case, it caused cerebral palsy. Right. So our whole world was turned upside down. And I think you first need to grieve, you need to cry, you need to realize you're about to take a very different path than you expected. And that, luckily, I'll just say quickly, we ended up doing some leadership training that helped us understand that there's still an incredible and beautiful life ahead for Samuel if we just support him, have a vision for him, and make sure he gets the resources and support he needs to be successful in school and outside of school.
Sure. Dan, you said your world was turned upside down, and really that's something similar that I'm seeing online with parents of special needs children. They're sharing their experiences, and this is one from Sherry. She says, I'm sad that my third grader is at a pre-K level in reading, writing, and math. She uses hashtag autism. And Maureen, she finishes with saying, I torture myself over this because we asked, do you think the school is doing enough? So in an instance like this, when in your case your preschooler is kicked out of school, what then are your options? Where do you turn?
Well, it's for the private preschools, they have a lot of options in the sense of that they don't have to take your child because they have another child who's going to be much easier to teach in the classroom, and they're going to take that child and that parent's money instead of yours because yours is going to be much more difficult. Once you get into the school age, the public schools, because of the law in 1975, has to take your child. Right. And to tell this viewer that the reality is this, is that the school is not going to do nearly as much as you want them to do. And I understand this. My child was in 4th grade and couldn't read a 3-letter word and couldn't add 2 numbers without a number line. Today she's in high school. Today she is doing high school level work, but not because of what the schools did, because of what I did outside of the schools. And the great news for all of the parents who have these children who cannot perform at grade level is that you can brain train. Now the schools aren't going to do that because the school's objective is to put knowledge in their head. With whatever abilities they have, they're going to try to teach you the knowledge that they can teach. They're going to, all the standards of learning, the core curriculum, all of the standards that are being set up are based upon what you know. And what the special ed community does is teach you the best they can with the skills you have, the cognitive skills, the brain skills you have, to learn as much of that knowledge as they can teach you. But they're not going to actually remediate why you can't learn this. And the way you remediate is through training the cognitive skills. So I can tell you as a parent, you will be forever frustrated with the schools not doing as much as you want them to do.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting what Maureen was saying. I really empathize with her. And just quickly, the expulsion rate through preschool through high school, the highest rate of expulsion actually happens in preschool. That's an incredible stat. But I would say, I have had a different experience with Maureen in the sense that, first of all, every parent loves their child, and every parent wants their child to be happy and successful, whatever that vision of success is. And parents make a lot of different decisions about that based on their experience. Maureen sounds like did not have an experience where the school was willing to really get to know their child and how their child learns and make sure that the education is modified in a way, or there's ways that they can teach their child effectively. We've fortunately had a really different experience with Samuel, and I've seen this around the country in my film travels, in that many, many schools are actually finding ways to teach material in a universal way, where kids who are visual learners can learn it visually, kids who are auditory learners can learn it auditorially, and they're finding a way to teach the core concepts effectively. Now the challenge is that inclusion, in this type of teaching varies from, of course, country to country, but even in the United States, state to state, town to town, school to school, and even classroom to classroom.
Right. Dan, take a breath for a moment, because I want to show a little bit of a film that became very, very popular and was nominated. It's called Including Samuel. So it was Samuel when he was a little bit younger. And you investigate this debate between should kids who have special needs be in special learning environments or maybe in inclusive learning environments. Here's a little clip from this, and you'll see Samuel in a inclusive learning environment. Have a look at this.
At school, his friends love him. He loves his friends. He just has a great time. He loves his teacher loves him, Mrs. O'Brien.
Every child has their own way of learning. Inclusion is the best way for every child to learn, not just the child who comes in with a speech issue, or the child who uses a wheelchair, or a child who is ESL, who doesn't know the English language and joins your classroom. It's every single child has a multiple way of learning, and we need to discover those ways.
Wow, see, that's controversial right there, that phrase, inclusive is the best way for every child to learn. There is a big debate about that. Let me bring in the teacher, though, because it seems to me, Mary, that you are critical in this debate about whether kids should be in mainstream schools, in special education schools. What is your take? You've taught special ed kids.
Yes, I have, and I've had different experiences depending on the child. For example, in 3rd grade one year, I had a child who was labeled with Asperger's, and he was a really easygoing, enjoyable child, but a lot of trouble with being social and with language. And although I worked really hard with the morning meetings, we called them, and getting together and talking about, problem solving and getting along with each other, respecting one another, I would catch another child push his head up against the wall. Ooh. And I couldn't just let that go. You have to make sure that every child is not just going to learn, but they are going to be respected. And so you immediately take issue with that, and you do something about it, and you talk to them, and if you need to, you separate it and you talk to those parents of that bully, because the child who is at a level of a moderate level, and it's not severe, and it's not disrupting the class, that's fine. And the children who are beside them, they are learning, oh, people are different, and I'm different too. Sure. And I appreciate that, but I can also help him feel more comfortable.
Sure. And did you succeed in that case, Mary?
Yes, I did.
Great.
But there were others where it was very, very difficult, and the way inclusion was originally meant to play out was truly with the special ed teacher who has the background knowledge and that degree to be in the classroom with the classroom teacher who does not have that experience or education for that special, But when you work hand in hand with the special ed teacher, then it's wonderful, and it will work smoothly, unless you get a child who is severely disabled and they are making such outbursts in the classroom, and they are throwing things and they are using foul language that everybody is just, you're not a community of learners anymore. There's this fear,
I was just going to say that I think, Mary, I love the idea of collaborative teaching, as you talked about, of having a team approach, because I think it's really a lot to expect of any one teacher to do it all, right? And so really team teaching, teamwork is critical. I do think that the behavior she was talking about, I believe strongly that behavior is a form of communication. And when a kid, particularly with a disability, is acting out that way, they're trying to communicate something to us, and the key is how do we figure out what that communication is? Because really, I don't think any kid wants to be a bad kid or be the bad kid. So there are a lot of ways that we can figure out what's causing that behavior. I'd also say, for me, there's just a really important premise to this discussion, which is that there's been 30 years of research around kids with disabilities in this country. And every study I've ever been able to find shows that inclusive education actually promotes better educational outputs, outcomes, social outcomes, employment outcomes, across the board. Now, is that to say that every single kid is going to be successful all the time in general ed? No. Kids are unique in their own way, and we need to find out what's the perfect or the best possible situation we can come up to support this kid in their learning. For some kids, that's going to be in general ed all day. For some kids, it might be general ed half the day. But that should always be the starting place, because all the research says that's going to provide positive outcomes.
Maureen, Dan mentioned the positives of inclusive learning, but we are hearing about some of the challenges. And so on Facebook, Ibrahim says, my son was in what he writes normal school, was in a normal school, but teachers are not trained to handle these children. And because he's different, children were cruel, and I had no option but to place him in a special school, and he's much happier. Mansoor follows up, another person on Twitter, says, you don't need to invest in all teachers, but every school should have a few teachers who can treat such cases. Did you find that to be the case?
It's very much the case, and what Dan has said is absolutely true. That if you have that special ed teacher working side by side the general education teacher and really working as an integrated team, it can be a really fabulous experience for everybody, because even the kids that are referred to as neurotypical regular kids can benefit from that special ed approach to introducing or presenting the information. The difficulty you get is when you try to put a one-size-fits-all into the inclusion, and that's what I'm seeing the schools trying to do, because it's economically a lot easier to do, and it's also, you have a lot more scalability if you can do that, and it doesn't work to have a one-size-fits-all. So they try to do the one-size-fits-all, and I can tell you from my experience, my child's learning has needed to have some inclusion, a lot of inclusion, less inclusion, even less inclusion, now more inclusion, depending upon the subject and the nature of what was going on that particular year.
Right, so even though the law says every child, regardless of whatever their abilities, disabilities might be, they have to be in school. You can't just say, oh, well, they have to be in this school or they have to be in that school. It's almost like you're customizing their education.
Really, but the challenge, though, of course, is that the schools are across the U.S., and I can imagine it's got to be across the world, are strapped for resources.
So it's money. It's always money. It's
always money, and I can tell you that it comes down to it. But the challenge is really also finding the right enviation for that particular area. How does this child learn best?
All right,
and is it the right environment for them to learn best?
When does she socialize with all of her peers, and she's not just specifically in an environment that is good for her in terms of her learning abilities?
She is easily able to participate with her peers in all the electives, in any kind of elective course, in PE, at lunch. She's very sociable. She's very sociable. The kids adore her. She's very much accepted and included. But when she needs to learn core content, real content that's expected to be able to progress to the next level of education, it has to be a much more I should say, pulled out in a smaller environment so that she actually can focus and really get the time and the pace and really focus on, as I call, the essential learning and not all the extras that are not essential.
All right. Dan, I heard you pipe up when we were talking about money.
Yeah, well, first I really appreciate Maureen's perspective and Mary's as well. Some really wonderful thoughts. I think money is a real trap to just blame it on money, because what I've found in doing these studies and research and films all around the country is that people who are struggling with inclusion usually don't say we just need more money. What they often need is more leadership from the principal, the superintendent, to say this is the philosophy of our school. We want this throughout our school, that we believe that all kids are competent. We believe that all kids can learn. We believe that kids benefit from inclusion with and without disabilities. And we're going to give our staff the organizational support and the training to make them feel competent to do this. And that's a really important component, is don't leave your staff out there on an island feeling like they're all alone. You need to support them. But honestly, what I'm seeing in classrooms that are working really well, it's the collaborative teaching, it's peers working together, it's teachers who can differentiate their instruction to reach all different kinds of learners, and it is also using, frankly, a lot of technology in the classroom these days to reach all kinds of learners. And I can't tell you how many teachers have said to me, wow, by having this child with some learning challenges with a disability in the classroom, it has made me a better teacher. And Barbara O'Brien, who you just saw in that clip with Samuel, she actually has no special ed training, but she's just a wonderful teacher.
Yeah,
and
just being a great teacher. That works too.
Every child.
All right, Malika.
Dan, I actually want to play a video comment here from a retired principal who has thoughts on this, and I'd like you to have a listen to this.
We need to remember that all children deserve to have high expectations, and to remember that all children will learn. Some are just going to need more modifications and accommodations. We don't need to water down our curriculum. We just need to provide students with disabilities the support that they will need.
So Dan, what stands in the way of those modifications really, besides money? You mentioned that. How much is it though? How much are we talking?
Well, I actually don't think it really at all it's a matter of money. Education needs money, right? I mean, you need staffing, you need to have good education. And I'm sure in many countries that's more of a struggle than here in the United States. I think that honestly what stands in the way is a coordinated approach that schools can replicate. And I actually, the largest federal education grant ever awarded, $25 million, came out a couple of years ago to a project called SWIFT, School-Wide Integrated Framework for Transformation. And this is just a nonprofit kind of federal effort. And I'm the filmmaker for this project. And I bring that up because what SWIFT is finding is that you can actually work with schools and work with states at the statewide level to come up with a model there where from the beginning schools are designed for all children. And I think that's the problem, is we feel like we're constantly reinventing the wheel in every school, and every teacher feels like they need to do all the modifications from scratch or come up with all the approaches. There are models that work, they just haven't been replicated thoroughly, and this project is very exciting because it's actually working to replicate what we've seen work through research on a national level.
Well, and I've seen that time and time again because I live in a community and I work with kids with special needs on a daily basis, and so I communicate with the parents all the time. And I can tell you that that the teacher in 7th grade in one middle school is doing it differently than the 7th grade teacher in a school that is just 4 miles down the road. They're in the same county, they're in the same grade, they're teaching the same subject, and yet they're both having to, from scratch, try to create the materials that you can do a differentiated learning environment. So I think that it would be much more scalable to be able to truly do differentiated learning in the classroom and include more children if in fact it was something that could be replicated.
All right, I'm going to leave you. Hold tight for a minute, guests, because we're rushing towards the end of the show. So I'm going to leave you with a little clip for this part of the program from a little girl called Tasha, who Dan actually filmed, and the film's called Tasha. She has autism, and she has lots of challenges and behavioural challenges, but the kids in her school have embraced her, and I think this is a good way to end this part of the discussion. Have a look at this.
If she wasn't in the classroom, she wouldn't be able to see what the other kids were doing to pick it up. She's very observant of what the other kids are doing. Some of the kids that she is in the classroom with now have been with her for a year or two, or have been with other students with different disabilities. So they're very open to helping out, and they're aware that they're modeling also.
Guys, we have to touch her. No, don't touch her, Bree. I'm not touching her. She's touching
We are taking this conversation about special education and where kids should be educated if they have special needs to the post-show stream.aljazeera.com. But first, here's Malika with some of the other stories we're following.
We start in the U.S., where Republican Senator Ted Cruz was booed off stage for praising Israel at an Arab Christian gala. Have a look.
If you will not stand with Israel and the Jews, no, then I will not stand with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Online, many pointed to the sizable population of Palestinian Christians to explain why Cruz's comments were considered offensive. On Twitter, Jamie elaborates, saying Cruz's comments reduced everything in the Middle East to being pro or anti-Israel. Crossing the Atlantic, Catalans are demonstrating to gain independence from Spain. Many are using hashtag Diada2014 on Twitter to express support, referencing Catalonia's National Day. They shared versions of the Catalan flag in the shape of a V for vote. Catalan leaders plan to hold a referendum on November 9th. Let us know what you think of those stories. Tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
Thank you very much. Also, the same hashtag to use if you want to be part of this conversation about special needs education in the post show. But first, before we get there, let me tell you about Monday's program. Imagine being arrested for not having a place to sleep. The homeless in the US are facing a spate of brand new laws that are leaving them with criminal records. So what is to gain from this? Send us your thoughts. Hashtag AJStream. But stay with us. We're heading to the post show right now. Stream.aljazeera.com. Malika and I will see you there. Thanks for watching. Hello, welcome to the Streams Online Post Show. We're continuing our discussion on the best classroom environment for special needs children. So still with us, we have Maureen Loftus. She's mother of a child with special needs, and she's also the Executive Director at Learning RX. Mary Lawfer is a teacher who has had special needs children in her classrooms, and Dan Habib is a filmmaker and project director at the University of New Hampshire Institute on Disability. There was something that occurred to me as I watched you, Maureen, and Mary, and also Dan, is that if you're involved with special needs children, you have to be exceptional to fight for what they need. It can't be just ending up with just a regular kid in your classroom or another, not any kid is regular, but just another kid in the family. You have to be exceptional. Why is that? Why are you battling? You have to be their advocate. Yeah. You have to step up to the plate and make sure that they get the resources that they need, that we are meeting their needs, whatever that takes. And I really believe it has to do with resources, because I know as a teacher, if I had that special education teacher with that background to help me in the classroom, then for some of the situations where it was a more severe situation and the child was out of control, it would have been totally different having that support. Now, it's not a question of is the child good or bad, okay? All children are good. We are all good. Sometimes we make bad choices. It's a question of... I like that line, Mary. I'm not a bad person, I just make bad choices.
but that's what children and everyone in the world needs to realize. It's a matter, that's what I mean when I say respect. And that's caring about others, coming down to the basics of peace and love, and really caring about your community. And in the classroom, that community builds on the relationships and the compassion. And if you as a teacher are doing your job, but you are not given the skills or given the support to know how to direct that child or redirect that child or support them in whatever way, what modalities or strategies to use, how can you possibly feel like you're being successful helping that child be successful?
And to Dan's point, it's in terms of that, it comes down to the teacher and to the leadership. It really does. And I can tell you that I have seen this time and time again as my child's progressed from age 2 through 14 and almost 15 now as a freshman in high school. It depends on the school, it depends upon the principal, it depends upon the teacher in that classroom. And so that's why you have to be, as a parent, constantly on the lookout. You can't, and I hate to say this, you can't trust that the school has your child's best interests in mind when you have a special needs child. And that's what forces you to be a strong advocate. That's what forces you to go to bat, to make sure that if you have this sense that something's not right in the classroom, you've got to speak up for your child because they can't do it for themselves. So I've had some years where I've had a great principal who has had tremendous inclusion and effectiveness, and they leave, and the next year in the same school, my child is treated completely differently, or the teacher has changed.
What school would that be, Maureen?
I prefer not to share that.
What's the sucky principal?
And then even within the same school, even shifting to middle school and then to high school, it changes so much depending upon the leadership as well as who is in that classroom.
Sure. Dan?
I love the fact, first of all, Maureen obviously is an incredible advocate, and I so applaud you. And I love the fact that Mary talked about compassion and relationships, because one of the things we didn't talk too much about in the main show was the reality of the social outcomes and the emotional outcomes for kids of inclusion, both with and without disabilities. Because one thing I've seen with my son Samuel is when he goes out into the community and plays baseball or does theater or is in the Scouts or anything he does, he has this sense of belonging because he knows those kids from school, and they know him, and they know how he communicates. And he's not the kid in the wheelchair, which unfortunately that's the label for a lot of kids you see in a school very rarely. He's Samuel, who loves the New England Patriots and sports and football and baseball and volcanoes and bird watching. They know him. And I think what they get from Samuel is a sense of the world is a very diverse place, and disability is part of that diversity. And it's not something we need to be afraid of. It's not something we need to be scared of. and they gain patience, they gain compassion, they gain a sensibility that people communicate in different ways. They walk in different ways, but that does not make them any lesser. They're part of our community.
I absolutely Mary, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there is someone here online who has thoughts on what might happen if children don't have that kind of support. So I'd like you to have a listen to this video comment and let me know.
By removing children into special schools, we're denying them their right to be included in our societies, and we're denying ourselves the benefit of having friends with disabilities. Children who are put into segregated schools are much more likely to face a lifetime of exclusion. It's not the child with special needs that's the problem, it's the way we organise our education systems, and that's what needs to change.
So Oliver talks about a lifetime of segregation, really.
Well, and I guess I want to make sure that I'm understood here, that when I say that a child needs to be in the general education setting or not, I am all for the children being in the regular public school so they can be included with their peers, but they can't always be taught effectively in that general education classroom. So it doesn't mean that they are separated into a hallway or that they're put into a special education school, but you as a parent have to make sure that the learning environment for your child is the most effective. And I have pushed very hard for my child to be included in all aspects of her life. She plays regular basketball, regular soccer, regular horseback riding, regular swimming. Now, is she the worst one on the team? Absolutely. But does the team cheer for her when she scores? It's amazing the eruption that happens when she makes the basket or she scores the goal on the soccer field, because they know what an accomplishment that is for her. And yes, she is included in the community, but I'm saying that in the school, that doesn't mean that she should be in the general education classroom for every subject, for every situation. Yes, she's included and she's accepted, but it does not mean that she is going to learn English or history effectively in a classroom with 30 people, even if you have 2 teachers who are paired really well, working effectively together.
You know, it sounds like Maureen's found a really great individualized approach for her daughter, and obviously you put so much thought into it. And what I'm finding with Samuel in high school is that there's a lot more independent study time in high school. Kids are expected to do some of their own work, and so Samuel can be part of those general discussions, which he really enjoys. But then when people are doing the independent work, he can pair off with his aide or maybe a peer and do some more intensive instructional work. So again, I think it's right. You can do a lot of educational work in the general ed classroom, but you can also receive some of that individualized support through creative scheduling.
And in the elementary preschool classrooms, we don't have the downtime.
Right.
There's something that occurred to me here, because I'm hearing all the positive side of the kind of education that you're advocating for your particular special needs children. I'm going to show you a little clip. Again, it's from Including Samuel, which is Dan's documentary, where he explored this whole debate about where should special needs children be educated. And there's a moment here where this little girl, she's losing it. She wants to play on the computer and she's freaking out. I've done this too, but this is, she's in school and it's not an ideal environment for it. Have a look at this.
Food stand. Why doesn't this become the food stand area?
You get to go on computers quite often.
I'm on computers now.
All right, why can't I go on the computer? I want to go on the computer now. Mary, in a classroom full of kids, how do you cope with that?
Well, the first thing you want to do is help the child calm down, okay, and try to understand what they're trying to say. What are they communicating, And if a boundary needs to be drawn, then that's where I, as a teacher, need the help sometimes in drawing that boundary with the child without lowering her self-esteem or anything. And that is the quandary. I mean, the way that inclusion was ideally meant to work, fabulous philosophy, but when the way it's been carried out has not been the way that it was intended. So that's the problem.
I think
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's the case in some situations. I totally agree with you, that inconsistency. When I was able to show my film, Including Samuel, all around the world, and one of the questions that came up all the time is, well, Samuel's cute, right? He's got a physical disability. What about kids with these hidden disabilities, whether it's autism or schizophrenia or other mental health challenges? And I'm hearing that those kids in some ways are more challenging to include. But what I've also found is that a lot of times when a child like that is in the classroom, their peers have the best sense sometimes as to how to help that child de-escalate.
Right.
It's amazing, and I've seen it again and again, where sometimes it's the peers that are the most intuitive, and I do think you can teach behavior. You know, some kids it's a lot harder than others, but behavior can be taught, and we focus on teaching English and math and social studies as we should, but we also need to teach behavior not just to kids with disabilities, but to all kids. You know, in this day and age, you really, behavior should be part of the curriculum.
And that's why I would buddy up a child with the child with special needs, you know, as their helper. Someone who's confident and who feels, you know, like they can really connect with that child. And so many times another child will explain something in the classroom and the teacher just said the same thing, but in the child's language it makes so much more sense to the other children. You know,
there's something I want to ask all of you. Because you're making your points really clearly, Mary and Dan and Maureen, and don't think I don't hear that you have different perspectives. I do hear that, but you're very polite at arguing with each other. Kudos to that. All right, I'm going to give you one sentence because we asked a very difficult question at the beginning, which is, what is the best learning environment for a special needs child? I'm going to give you just one sentence. Maureen.
It depends on what that child needs, and that's why you have something called an individual education plan, and it truly is an individual education plan. And so for every child, they need to have something different. And for somebody who is physically disabled, their learning environment may be very different than somebody who has an intellectual disability versus somebody who has a psychological disability.
Right, gotcha.
And so it really depends upon that child.
All right. Mary.
It depends upon what the child needs. And that is very important because you have children with mild disabilities all the way to severe disabilities who should be handled differently to better fit their needs.
I've got 2 it depends. I wonder if I will get 3 it depends. Dan?
No, not for me. I would say that for the vast, vast majority of kids with disabilities, it is the general ed classroom with the proper supports and modifications. And that is in the law, it's just often ignored, that last part.
Maureen, Dan, Mary, it's been so great having this conversation with you. I could talk to you for hours, but the internet window is about to shut tight, but before it does, Malika.
I'll leave us with this tweet, which really echoes something that our guests were talking about, behavior being taught and the buddy system in school. Iyad tweets in not too long ago, my son's classmate is special need, and my son's compassion and social responsibility grew to become an advocate at the age of 6, and he uses #hope.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you very much, the guests, the online community, for being part of this conversation. So on Monday, different topic, different day. Imagine being arrested for not having a place to sleep. The homeless in the US are facing a spate of brand new laws that are leaving them with criminal records. So what is going on here? You can send us your thoughts to #AJStream and we will pick up that debate on Monday. See you then.